Hi friends, Russell West here. I want to talk about PSA, prophetic situational awareness. Now, situational awareness is something that we all deal with all the time. Every time you get in the car, you tend to take a look around to see, do you have enough gas? What's the weather going to be like? Do I have all the things that I need with me? It takes about 3 to 5, 7 seconds or so, depending on the day, depending on the assumptions that you're making about your journey, but we tend to do it. The question that I have for our class is, can we get situational awareness from a redemptive point of view? Can we see what's happening inside of culture, what's happening in society, what's happening in history in real time to get some perspective on it? Now, I have a newspaper here. Bottom half of the fold, second section, it's a picture of the American president. He's tossing a soccer ball. This is Helsinki 2018. It says, President Donald Trump throws to his wife a ball from the 2018 World Cup, which he received from the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, on Monday at the Presidential Palace in Helsinki. Now, you may decide that this scene, because it's made it in a national newspaper, that this is newsworthy, and apparently it is. However, in light of what appears on the first page, allies get assailed, Russia gets respect. From a global perspective, from a redemptive focus point of view, the difference between soccer balls and the respect share between nations, you might agree, is the difference between what's trivial and what's really critical. As I've been making sense of what we're doing inside the PSA sites, I see that in some cases our conversations in terms of what we think would rise to the level of prophetic importance maybe a little bit more like soccer balls, that we're looking down and close and near to whatever we're happening to notice. I'm asking for something different. I'm asking you to assume the mantle of Isaiah, the mantle of Amos, the mantle of Deborah, that you would get the sense of what's going on around me in the world and what does God think of the matter. Perhaps a reading from A.W. Tozier is relevant at a time like this. Look at these words. We need the gift of prophetic insight, he emphasizes. A prophet is one who knows their times and what God is trying to say to the people of their times. Now, this particular author, who's writing in the 1950s, uses the he all the way through here, the male reference to all of humanity. I'm going to do my dead level best to pluralize this so that all of humanity, male and female, are considered in the speech pattern here. The way that they were in Genesis chapter 1 when God said, be like me, male and female. So the prophet is one who knows the times and what God is trying to say to the people of their times. Today we need prophetic preachers. Not preachers of prophecy merely, but preachers with the gift of prophecy. The word of wisdom is missing. We need the gift of discernment again in our pulpits, not the ability to predict what we need, but the anointed eye. The power of spiritual penetration and interpretation, and the ability to appraise the religious scene as viewed from God's position, and to tell us what is actually going on. Where is the man or the woman who can see through the ticker tape and the confetti to discover which way the parade is headed? Why it started in the first place, and particularly who's riding up front in the seat of honor? What is needed desperately today is prophetic insight. Scholars can interpret the past, but it takes prophets to interpret the present. Learning will enable a person to pass judgment on our yesterdays, but it requires the gift of clear seeing to pass judgment on our today, on our now. 100 years from now, historians will know what was taking place religiously in this year of our Lord, but that will be too late for us. We should know right now. If Christianity is to receive a rejuvenation, it must be by other means than is now being used. If the church in the second half of this century is to recover from the injuries she suffered in the first half, consider this as A.W. Tozer writing in the 50s and the 60s of the last century. She's to recover from those injuries she suffered in the first half. There must appear a new type of preacher. The proper ruler of the synagogue type will never do. Neither will the priestly type of man or woman who carries out their duties, takes their pay, and asks no questions, nor the smooth-talking pastoral type. Nor the smooth-talking pastoral type who knows how to make the Christian religion acceptable to everyone. All of these have been tried and found wanting. Another kind of religious leader must rise among us. This one must be of the old prophet type, the woman or the man who has seen visions from God and has heard a voice from the throne. And when he or she comes, and I pray there will be not one but many, they will stand in flat contradiction to everything our smirking, smooth civilization holds dear. They will contradict and denounce and protest in the name of God and will earn the hatred and opposition of a large segment of Christendom. Such a woman or man is likely to be lean, rugged, blunt-spoken, and a bit angry with the world. This person will love Christ and the souls of humanity with the point of willingness to die for the glory of one and the salvation of the other. But they will fear nothing that breathes with mortal breath. We need to have the gifts of the Spirit restored again to the church, and it is my belief that the one gift we need now is the gift of prophecy. A.W. Tozer from the little book called Of God and Men. It was a passage like that from Tozer that I had in mind when I designed this course almost 17, 18 years ago. When I looked at the design of our program and asked, are these leaders ready to read the sacred text of the created order? You say sacred text, isn't that the Bible? Well, of course it is in terms of special revelation. But we have David in Psalm 8 and Psalm 119 speaking of the handiworks of God, the creation of God. We have the fingerprints of God touching creation from the beginning and speaking injunctives inside of our nature that we should be like the Godhead, moving, governing, guarding, guiding inside of the world. And I believe that the pastoral practice and the pastoral planning and the missional activity that we see moving about here in the world that we've described in the first module as some messiness in mission bears coming under inspection. This is the chapter where we talk about the motives in mission. The module we talk about the motives in mission. Check out my talk back on various motives that come into play. And I'm saying we probably have this messiness and we probably have these multiple motives competing for top position because of our inability to penetrate, to see what time it is. There are all kinds of powers in the world. There's electricity, there's fire, there's water. But who can generate perspective power? That's what I want to talk about. The difference between leaders and followers is often perspective. The difference between good leaders and better leaders is better perspective. And the reason we're doing PSAs, the reason I'm asking you to walk out into the world, to click on social media to see what is going on there, to walk through your neighborhoods and to look at the world scene is because unless you have the capacity to be making sense of these things, unless you are intelligently in conversation with God and neighbor in these sort of things, why should you be considered strategic? Why should you be considered one that would be relied upon? Sure, God could use anybody and anything in spite of themselves, including donkeys. But Daniel says that the eyes of the Lord run to and fro the earth, looking for a woman or a man on whose behalf he may make himself strong to do exploits on the behalf of that one. Are you that kind of leader? Are you on the pathway to become that leader? Are you doing the one level loop of leading where everything you see around you is perceived at the level of a tourist, taking snaps and selfies while redemptive scenery is working its way out in the background around you? We've got to get past the selfie folks. We've got to get past the tourists to the folks who are going to become traders, who are going to live out amongst them. And I'm suggesting the PSA exercise where you get familiar with what I mean by prophetic situations. I've listed more than 101 of them for you inside of a document. There are things on them like the absence of church and social issues, aging in America, egalitarianism, midlife crisis, legal problems, immoral laws and lawsuits, the leadership vacuum, the pipeline shorter, mental illness throughout the world, sexual perversion, repression, unemployment crisis, urban blight, the state of public and political discourse. I've got 101 of these. You can generate another 101 based on your spirituality and your read of the situation. What I'm interested in is that you become sensitive to the scenes that are around you, that you gain the capacity to do the pastoral analysis that allows you to generate a new way forward. I have a book here called Social Analysis, Linking Faith and Justice by Joe Holland and Peter Henright, two Catholic theologians. Look at something that they say in the outset of their book. I think it's relevant. The deepest source of cultural energies, indeed the deepest source of all human creativity, flows from the participation in divine creativity. The creativity of human culture is humanity's participation in the creative spirit of God, who brooded over the waters in Genesis and still moves within the depths of human civilization. But the crisis of our present civilization here, these energies of creativity are being converted on a massive scale into energies of destruction. Now, this is, taking the headlines of the news, and the cultural moment that these represent, and acknowledging this is the social situation in which I'm inserted. This would be the first stage of their social analysis model. Their next phase would be, once you recognize you are inserted, that you have a certain social location, the next task is analysis. You begin to ask the interpretive questions. You begin to interrogate the physical space around you. I'm going to record a talk back that is on the philosophy of certainty, epistemology. What are the 5 sources that we tend to reach towards to be certain about a thing? I'm going to talk about that in one of those talkbacks, and you're going to see that it's relevant in this place. So look at this dynamic conversation that's going on between these two energies that the priests refer to. Increasingly, the energies of our civilization are pointed towards destruction. Toward destruction of the poor, toward destruction of those who speak for life and justice, toward destruction of family and community, toward destruction of our precious earth, toward destruction of the human race. At their root, these energies of destruction are extinguishing the image of God in humanity and all of creation. In this respect, they become demonic. The classical analysis of the secular left and the religious right break down before this cultural crisis of all industrial civilization. The classic left challenges social destruction, but it cuts itself from the religious root of the creativity, which would respond to it in a holistic and a full way. It has rightly perceived the great divide towards social destruction at the heart of modern civilization, the left has, but it has generally failed to perceive the destructive blocking of the divine creativity, which flows from an ever-deepening progressive secularization of society. As a result, its efforts to stop the destruction often prove sterile, sometimes even compound the crisis. The flat vision of secular scientific socialism or of secular scientific state as the key to the future feeds the loss of this cultural creativity. Well, that's the left. The situation on the classic religious right is just the opposite, with the same unfortunate result. For the religious right, the main problem is secularization. It correctly sees the whole progressive movement as deepening secularization and therefore cutting itself off from the divine root. But the religious right fails to understand the prophetic side of the divine and winds up defending the very social destruction that the left fights against. The right tries to retrieve an authoritarian, patriarchal, militaristic society tied this time to powerful modern technology. I'm going to read that phrase again. The right tries to retrieve an authoritarian, patriarchal, militaristic society tied this time to powerful modern technology. It appeals to a divine image, but that divine image is no longer the living God of justice and peace. It is rather a war god, a god of oppression, an idol. The idol, in turn, provides religious legitimation for demonic destruction. Thus, on one side, secular left often makes of secularization its own idol and cuts itself off from the divine root of human creativity. On the other side, the religious right holds high the principle of religious transcendence, but often allows a false god to unleash the demonic. The complete task, and this is what I've been reading towards, the complete task is to link faith energies with energies of justice and peace in the service of the living God and social transformation. Faith and justice need to become one flesh in service of both. The secular hunger for justice from the left needs to find its deeper root in spirituality. The spiritual hunger of the right needs to find true God's true face in justice and peace. There are two seeds of creativity in the world: social engagement and spirituality. Similarly, within the Christian community, these two movements have their echo. On one side, justice and peace movement, often developed in secular style, and on the other side, the prayer movement, often developed without social engagement. Okay. As John Stott once said, we read with a newspaper in one hand and with the sacred text in the other. I am encouraging us to develop eyes of social exegesis, spiritual lens of social exegesis, in the same way that we develop these lenses for the text. To echo the words of Tozer once again, these final urgings from a last century prophet. What we need desperately today is prophetic insight. Scholars can interpret the past. It takes prophets to interpret the present. Learning will enable a person to pass judgment on our yesterdays, but it requires the gift of clear seeing to pass sentence on our own day. 100 years from now, historians will know what was taking place religiously in this year of our Lord, but that will be too late for us. We should know right now. So friends, the invitation to gain prophetic situation awareness, to begin to tune it and develop a way of maintaining it is the leadership competency and invitation of that assignment. Take it to your small groups. Mix it up, mash it up. Call one another to depths. Call one another to more incisive analysis. Send one another text and things that you're reading that you think would help them penetrate the social situation you're looking in. Find where we're inserted. Find what we must do for analysis. And then their third phase, then we engage the theological reflection. Think about the words of Psalm verse 2. I will read some of it to you as we think about this passage I've referred to. Why do the nations conspire and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth, they rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in the heavens laugh, and the Lord scoffs at them both. He rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. He said to me, you are my son, and I become your father. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations as your inheritance. The ends of the earth is your possession. And you will break them with a rod of iron and will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise and be warned, you rulers of the earth, serve the Lord with fear, with trembling. Kiss towards the Son, or the old Hebrew word worship, prostrate yourself. Kiss towards the Son, or he will be angry. And your way will lead you to destruction, lead to your destruction. For his wrath can flare up in a moment. But blessed are all those who take refuge in him. As Brutus said to Julius Caesar, there is a tide that rises in the affairs of humanity. And if taken at a flood, it will lead on to victory. But if we miss that tide, if we miss the hand that stirs the water of that tide in our own time, and say that we are the ecclesial leaders appointed for our time, then we are committing malpractice. Take seriously the assignment. Get beyond the academic structure of it. Talk to everyone in your group. Sure, you're only responsible for pursuing 2 people for conversation, but anyone who comes to your conversation, host it and go deeper. This is your 8-week chance to activate this lens of prophetic situational awareness.